again, thank you for having everybody to listen to me out and hear him speak. I'm very privileged and honored to introduce him to you all, and many of you know him and known him from various and sometimes the beginning of his journey. And I'm coming to the journey now, and since I've been a part of Ralph's life, my life has been filled with a lot of light. And so I'm going to hand it over to Ralph and let him share his work and the work of Baba Virsa Singh. Thank you so much.
It's really me who has to applaud all of you for coming out to share this evening. I had to come. For you it was optional. So the applause is for all of you. I always look at life as a grand spiritual journey. And when I had to do what Babaji had charged me with doing 40 years ago, which was writing and sharing my spiritual experiences, I had a terrible time. Because I'm sitting at the feet of someone who is truly one with God, a great spiritual life. I never could find the proper voice with which to share. And then I suddenly realized that the best voice was the voice which I'd always used. One of a student at his feet, because I felt we were all students, and it became very easy to simply share our class notes together. I don't like this idea of someone at an advanced level and someone at a lower level. I don't like this idea. We're all together. We all are more or less, from one perspective, given a punch card for our standardized test when we come in the world. Each of us have the same course, which is called life, but how it unfolds and the type of tests that God gives us in terms of our spiritual growth plays out differently. But as good classmates, it's our responsibility to support each other and share a little bit of what I've learned, you share a little bit, it helps us all move along the path. And so it's with that spirit, which is very much Babaji's spirit, which I'd like to share a little bit with you. We've been allocated an hour, or maybe a little less, and then I'm told the floor falls out from under us. But really, and during that time, perhaps I'll speak for maybe a half hour, and then happily take any questions and get any kind of dialogue about any subject under the sun, actually, which is reasonable, because Babaji's sense of spirituality is that it touched all aspects of life. And let me just start by saying that as much as we are in a beautiful bookstore, that spirituality is not a section of a bookstore. Spirituality is very much how we live our life. And everything I've seen and understood and heard is that in many traditions when a child is born, that first cry after the umbilical cord is cut is not simply a gasp for air. It's a cry of separation from God. And the rest of our life is actually finding our way back. Finding our way back. I think in the book I put it that we so often may be spiritual orphans born to surrogate parents. And no matter how much love and material love our parents shower on us, there is still something missing which we can't understand. And that ultimately leads us on our path so we can reunite with our spiritual family and our Father, as it may be, and find our way back to connect with God. I truly believe that everyone, when they are young, can hear that voice which speaks within them. Call it You know something? Do you mind if I disrobe? I mean, I'll only take my jacket off. I'm not talking about it. But it's a little warm. It must be that I'm warming up. Is that still okay as far as the mic goes? Feels better. So, when we are young, we can hear that voice. Somewhere along time, now you call it a voice of our conscience, call it the voice of the universe, but we are tuned into that voice that leads us along. Somewhere as we get older and enter society, I find that the problem today with society is not only scientifically that we've severed or medically severed the physical umbilical cord, but in essence we've severed the spiritual umbilical cord so that that connection with God in a material world is very much lost. And so, when I was young, that voice was very strong within me. And as I put in the book, somewhere between Boy Scouts and Bar Mitzvah and Boy Scouts, the world sort of closed in, and I lost touch with that. But as I grew and as I was in college trying to understand how humanity had gotten themselves locked in this seemingly endless downward spiral and looking at all types of political solutions or economic solutions, I found that the only thing that was going to change the way we lived was to change our consciousness. And the only subject which dealt with consciousness was religion. But no doubt, institutional religions were as much a part of the problem as they are the solution. And so I was struggling with this when, over a cup of tea in a friend's apartment on the Upper West Side outside of Columbia's back base, in the blink of an eye, this great spiritual being was standing in front of me with a diamond-like light shining from his head. His eyes literally held the universe, and he just held up his hand and said, "Don't be afraid." Because trust me, when someone enters your consciousness, it is a very startling experience. He drew me out through his eyes, toured me around the universe, made me feel like he possessed all knowledge I could ever attain, and as a role model was everything I could ever aspire to be. Brought me back, showed me something similar to an atom, and said, "Meditate on this," and vanished. I opened my eyes, and my friend, it may have been a second. For me, it was eternity. Now, I must clarify, it was the summer of '70, but we were only drinking green tea. There was nothing else in it at all. And these are not psychedelically induced experiences. The essence was that 6 months later, I had given away, after I'd given away all my worldly possessions and set out on a quest. I actually have someone very instrumental. I took off ostensibly to be part of to reach the Tibetan community in Dharamsala in time for the New Year. I'd never seen a Sikh in my life. I didn't know there was such a religion as Sikhism. I'd never come across it in my studies. And yet here I was being drawn closer and closer, so that by the time I got to Afghanistan, probably, literally his voice was calling, "My son, you'll be home in 7 days. My son, you'll be home in 6 days." And as we crossed the border from Pakistan into India, coming down over the Khyber to the mountains, I ended up at Amritsar at the Golden Temple, but I had no idea where I was, what was happening. And my traveling companion, who's here tonight to be connected with, said, who was Swami Nityananda's great devotee, set up his ashrams at Ganeshpuri and here, said, "Well, if you can't more or less find what you were supposed to hear, come with me, We'll go down to Delhi. And when we were in Delhi, in his pocket, he had the address of Gobind Sadan. Now, Gobind Sadan, I grew up in Iceland. I was born in Syracuse and grew up in Iceland. But if you go past Iceland, in the 50s, Iceland was getting towards the end. I mean, the Hamptons were there, but if you got out to Mauritius and everything else, you had duck farms. It wasn't that developed. Now it's, non-stop all the way out. But imagine going out maybe 100 years ago when there was nothing out there but farms. Gobind Sadan was on the outskirts of Delhi, but in an area that nobody normally would go to. And Babaji had set it up that way. And so Yogi Ram, whose name was Ram at that time, had the address of Gobind Sadan in his pocket through a circuitous means, which we can talk about later. And he took me to Gobind. He said, while we're in Delhi waiting for Swami Nityananda, I know a saint. Let's go and stay there. And so when we went out there, and I come into the small room silhouetted against window with light shining on his bed, beautiful light emanating, long black beard, was the one who had appeared to me in the vision in New York, and that is Baba Virsa Singh. And I was absolutely stunned, because in the vision I had no idea that this was an actual person. I thought this was some archetypic event in my life, which it was. And he looked at me and he laughed, and he said, "You're a student. Have you found God in your books yet?" And he said, "Why do you think it should be so easy to find God when it takes 30 or 35 years to become a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer? You should find God without any effort whatsoever." And he said, "God is within you." That much I had understood. But here was someone who was speaking intimately about God, who I knew basically from encounter in New York, understood these things. And here he was offering it to me free, not asking anything. And he said, "Here, you take this prayer. This is your first lesson, and you're way behind in your studies. And tomorrow God is going to come and give you your final exam. And take this prayer and recite it like you're cramming for your final." Now, look at that. I had done nothing but cram for the last 15 years of my life.